skills, got mad skills, got mad skills, I will get wild. Got mad skills, got mad skills, got mad skills, I will get wild.
No. You know what? No slow opening, no teasing. Today, we're analyzing the best part of these games, the snowboarding. This is what we've been all waiting for, the amazing snowboarding. Jesus, I'm so fucking excited, I'm gonna explode. Hi. It's been a while, hasn't it? Bruh. Thanks for checking in. I know it's a little bit annoying when YouTubers show their dumb ugly mugs on camera for what feels like no reason, but I am a person and I have my thoughts and opinions, and I feel like it's just appropriate to say hi, you know? No more reading stupid text, no more listening to a random snotty, nasally voice. No, you're gonna see that snotty, nasally voice, so hi, it's nice to meet you. I'm Delmar. Alright, welcome to part 3. The snowboarding, the thing that you came here for, you know? The thing we've been excited for this whole damn time, and you know, it took me long enough. We've already covered the setting and the characters of both of these games to get an idea of where their strengths and weaknesses lie. However, the snowboarding kind of is the meat and potatoes of these whole games, so let's get into it. I had a bit of a process when it came to analyzing these games, a need to perhaps dissect and understand every single bit and piece of it. Everything that came before this was just kind of my interest, my passion, the way to analyze these games in ways that I found was meaningful. However, snowboarding is an entirely different story because that is what these games are made from. So I'm gonna do it a little bit different. We're not doing any big breakdown. I am just going to talk about these games in a way that I feel is appropriate because I've played the fuck out of them. I mean, like, I love these games more than I love most video games. They've done a lot for me, and they've been there for me, and I feel like it's only fair to properly provide the analysis that they deserve. When you're talking about these games with people, the gameplay is really the only thing that you actually care about. Sure, the maps are cool, the characters are interesting, but ultimately it's the one unanimous thing that everyone can relate to when they talk about the SSX games. It's the snowboarding. So let's just get straight into it. If you've never played an SSX game before, first of all, welcome. And second of all, let me explain it to you. The SSX games place you in the enormous shoes of a snowboarder taking part in multiple trick and race style events. All of the courses, typically downhill, incentivize the player to go as fast as they can and do as many tricks as they can in order to max out their adrenaline meter. Adrenaline is the speed boost mechanic of this game. By doing tricks, you'll accumulate a bit of it that you can use to speed up. And if you save it and get all the way to the max red portion, you'll be able to perform tricky moves. These are insane, gravity, physics-defying tricks, and upon doing enough of them, your racer will be rewarded with either a full unlimited adrenaline meter or about 1.5 minutes of a limited adrenaline meter, depending on the game that we're talking about. The adrenaline meter is an extremely important aspect of the game because it separates SSX from the other snowboarding games of its time. This system forces the players to find a balance between speed and style. You want to get down the mountain as fast as you can through as much speed as you can. But to get a bit of a boost, you have to be stylish. You gotta show off what you can do. But if you spend too much time doing too many tricks, or maybe commit too hard to tricks that aren't perhaps wise to do at the time, you're gonna suffer for it. To put it plainly, you're playing SSX at its best when you're gaining speed, prepping spins and jumps, getting big air, and performing even bigger tricks. If you do all these things, success in first place is just going to come naturally. And the best part about it is that it feels great. This essential gameplay style is supported by the course design in both games, where they consistently reward the player for curiosity and experimentation while employing the techniques I just described. Up to this point, my descriptions have generally matched both games, but now we're going to dive into some of the specifics, starting with Tricky. Something I neglected to mention in my last video were the different board types that Tricky features. There are 3 board types available: Freestyle, BX, and Alpine. And they all vary in how they perform in events, with Freestyle being very trick-oriented, Alpine being much more speed-based, and BX being a mix between the two. These different board options are one of the few times Tricky gets to show and not tell in regards to developing their characters. A writer's board preference is a lot of their personality. Mac and Kiori, for example, are highly focused on doing stylish tricks, whereas Brody and Marisol are a lot more speed-oriented. As far as gameplay complexity goes, Tricky ends just about there. Grinding is unfortunately quite simple. You can do rotations and turns while on a rail, but there really isn't much else that the game offers you. From my experience, I would say that the rails in Tricky are really only there for a speed boost, if anything. And with that being said, SSX 3 surpasses Tricky greatly when it comes to its gameplay complexity. While 3 sadly did not carry over this different board type option, now everyone is essentially identical and uses the same board, they did add much more depth to the trick mechanics. To start, let's look at the enhanced combo system. Tricky had an incredibly basic and vague combo system, so insignificant that I'm only going to mention it as a comparison point. While it did reward players for chaining tricks, a lack of in-game support meant that most players weren't going to be getting combos, rather combos were going to be happening to them. SSX3 changed the system for the better by introducing a proper combo system that rewards players for chaining tricks. Racking up a high combo count is a surefire way to succeed in any trick-based event, and it's always satisfying watching that number rise up, and it's always heartbreaking to see it plummet down. But either way, that's the beauty of it. It's an additional, optional gameplay aspect that makes boarding much more exciting. Any combo game worth its salt needs to have a reliable combo extender, and 3 does not fail in this regard either, with one of my favorite new additions to the game, tail and nose presses. Presses essentially allow you to carry on a combo indefinitely as long as you're paying attention, and it's balanced by the constant downhill and obstacle-ridden nature of all the courses you ride on. It's always fun to watch your character spin around and get buttery. Presses segue greatly into the revamped grinding system that SSX3 offers, and the rail functionality here blows trickies out of the water. Players can now perform presses and also special uber tricks on these rails, and they are now for much more than just a speed boost. You can also perform hand plants on rails, and just in general, and yeah, that's cool. To be honest with you, I feel like hand plants are kind of a forgotten aspect of 3 because they didn't really develop them that much, but hey, I'm not going to complain about more game mechanics. The last new mechanic to mention is an additional modifier that is applied when tricks are performed, depending on how the move is inputted, whether it be inverted, slowed, etc. It all depends on how you use the D-pad. These were somewhat present in Tricky, as a player could get a big air bonus off of big jumps, but similar to Tricky's own combo system, it was very vague and really only happened on accident. So we've gone over the essential boarding mechanics of both games, but how about improving your character? You have to get better at spinning, flipping, and racing and everything, right? There needs to be a progression, and of course both games do offer it. For Tricky, advancement is quite simple. You just need to get through the world circuit and proceed through all the events. While that happens, your character will gradually get better and better at what they do, whether it be tricks, speed, or being stable while racing. 3, on the other hand, is quite a bit simpler. Every character has the same base stats, just like how they have the exact same base board, and you'll increase your character by spending money to increase their rider stats. This means that you can essentially hoard all the money you earn from events and only spend it on leveling up your character. By the way, that's the best way to play the game. That's kind of the thing. Neither of these games have a perfect leveling system. To start with Tricky, the whole leveling up thing is off balance by the presence of the trick book. Every racer has their own unique trick book that you can access through the pause menu. And players incentivized to do these tricks as the more chapters you complete, the more outfits you go unlock for your character. It's always satisfying to see a new outfit unlocked when you pull out that really hard to do trick. And once you complete all the chapters in the trick book, you'll unlock the Uberboard, which is the best snowboard that a player can use. Everyone has an Uberboard, and it's based off their rider preference. However, the introduction of these Uberboards kind of complicate the whole system of the game a little bit. A clever player will know that they can spend the entirety of the first race on Garibaldi doing every single trick in the trick book. At my best, it only took me the first race at Garibaldi to unlock all 6 chapters of the trick book, which means that you'll be starting Snowdream with the best snowboard that racer can use. Does that sound fair to you? I'm not sure if that sounds fair to me. And yes, this is offset by the fact that some of the tricks are quite hard to achieve, but Garibaldi has huge air potential, and even with base stats, you can get all of them done. Personally, I don't love the Uberboard system in Tricky. It kind of ruins the whole 3-board system that I was talking about earlier, as each racer only gets access to one Uberboard, and in addition to that, the actual boards themselves look boring as hell. Silvery, chrome, nothing. There's so much art present on all the snowboards that every racer has access to, and then you get to the last one and it's just stupid silver chrome. Who wants that? I think the system could be improved in 2 ways. First of all, allow a player to use whatever board design they want while using the Uberboard. This allows them the best of both worlds. They get to have the best board option available, but get to use the art that they want for it. Secondly, I would suggest allowing a player to use whatever board type they want when using the Uberboard. That means that you could race on a BX, Alpine, or Freestyle Uberboard regardless of what character you're playing as. You completed the trick book, right? You should be allowed to race and trick however you want to. Who cares what kind of board your rider wants? What do you want to do? 3 system isn't bad per se, but I do think that it's a bit boring that the best way to play the game is to dump every single dollar you get into your stats as soon as possible. If you succeed in all the events and spend every single dollar you have on increasing your stats, you'll be max level at about the midpoint of Peak 2. Ultimately, I find that SSX3 has the best leveling system of these games because I think Tricky's Uberboard system is a bit gimmicky, but they both have places where they could improve. Now, I'm going to put this disclaimer right now. I don't know how to do monster tricks in SSX 3. I know that they're a big part of the game, and I really do enjoy how they reference the artists and people that were involved in the creation of the game, but I think they're just a bit too vaguely incorporated for my liking. I don't think it would have been difficult to have a function in the lodges, perhaps only on Peak 3, where you could buy a guide to each one of the monster tricks for a bit of cash. This would create a much needed decision point for the player in SSX 3, as right now, the only reason to hold on to money is to upgrade your stats. The game throws a lot of money at you, and I think an additional way to invest it would be an improvement to the game as a whole. I do like monster tricks, but I don't think it's very fun to have to look them up on Google every time I want to do one. That's why I don't do them. If the game had given me a proper way to learn it myself in-game, I think I'd be much more inclined to perform them. And that's the unfortunate thing. Some of the events on P3 are quite difficult, especially the show-off style events. Allowing a player to invest their money to improve their score in these events, I feel is a very worthwhile prospect. And I also understand that monster tricks are just a part of the game's era, the time the game was released in. At the time SSX3 released, the internet was still very young, and so they wanted you to buy guides and help books to perform these monster tricks as a way to encourage you to understand more about the game and experiment more. But again, it's 2023, bitch! Ultimately, I feel the same about monster tricks as I do hand plants. I wish they were incorporated into the game better, but I'm not going to complain about their addition. Another aspect worth mentioning is the actual game style of both of these games. Because yes, of course, they're both snowboarding games, but the actual functions of them are quite a bit different. I would say that SSX Tricky is an arcade-style snowboarding game, whereas SSX 3 is an open-world snowboarding game, and there are quite a few differences between the two. I've already gone over quite a few of these differences, such as the fact that SSX 3 takes place on one mountain, whereas Tricky takes place in multiple different courses, so I'm really going to focus on the gameplay aspect of these differences. Start with Tricky. The way that you perform flips and spins in this game is quite interesting. As the moment that you stop inputting a move, your character will stop dead in their tracks in the middle of the air. This harkens back to the original gameplay style of SSX, along with the game's arcade roots. You have to input the trick exactly. The game is not going to hold your hand through it. SSX 3, on the other hand, treats their flips and spins a bit differently, and perhaps more realistically. If you start a flip or a spin in midair, if you stop pressing the D-pad, your character is going to finish performing the action that you inputted, no matter what. The arcade style that Tricky has is honestly pretty enjoyable to me. I kind of do miss the way that you have to adjust your board before you land every single time. SSX3 just makes it so easy. You do a flip trick, you do a spin, and automatically the game will orient yourself correctly to the ground. In Tricky, you really gotta work for it. I think the board orienting feature is actually really interesting in Tricky. It makes it so that you have to stretch your tricks to the absolute max. If you do too many flips and spins and your character just can't seem to finish it, if you move the analog stick just a little bit, you might be able to angle your board just so much that you can actually land. And it feels good. Sure, it looks silly, but I mean, it feels good to do, and these games are not exactly the pinnacle of realism, are they? SSX 3 has to take a more realistic approach because the game is meant to be more realistic. It takes place on the same mountain, all the events are somewhat meant to be realistic, so the board needs to feel realistic too. When speaking of gameplay styles, I really do think there's something to be enjoyed for each game, and I don't think that one is necessarily better than the other. They really are just two unique styles. Now, I spent a lot of time discussing both the game's aspects, but I haven't really answered the critical question: which one's better? And as much as I would really like to say that it's a subjective decision based on your preference when it comes to snowboarding games, I do think there is a definitive answer. And for this explanation, I have to pull back a little bit. I have to really try to get rid of my bias because I spent so much time playing both of these games. I pick up a controller and immediately know how to control my character on a snowboard. But ever since I made these videos, I spent a lot of time trying to show friends, family, loved ones the SSX games. And one of the things that they immediately struggle with is, of course, the snowboarding. Unfortunately, it isn't the most intuitive thing in the world. It does take some time getting used to. Prepping jumps and spins and performing grabs in the air and having to really board to make sure you're going fast. It does take a bit of work to get used to. Unfortunately, Tricky doesn't really provide that good of a spot to really learn the controls. Sure, yes, they have free ride, they have practice, but who really wants to take their time to play a mode like that? It's not that compelling. And in that regard, SSX3 succeeds greatly, because for a player to actually get to a race or show-off style event, they had to snowboard there in the first place. And sure, you could say they could just pause and transport their way to it, but again, a new player isn't likely to know how to actually do that. They're probably just going to see their character snowboard and want to follow the big signs that are right in front of them. And that's really the beauty of it. SSX3 is taken at entirely your own pace. Even DJ Atomica emphasized this in the beginning part of the game, when you're told you can start at any race or show-off event you want, or you can just snowboard around and explore the courses and see what they have to offer. And even better, the actual free ride option, there's things to do. There are events you can take part in, challenges that you can do, and they reward you. SSX Tricky doesn't have any of that. If you freeride, you're just freeriding for the sake of seeing the course and getting to know it, which of course isn't a bad thing. But where's the additional bells and whistles? Come on, we want them. I know some might think it's silly to focus on this as an aspect, but I really do think it's important. Not everyone's gonna know how to play this game on a first try, and getting a chance to learn the controls and get comfortable with it before actually starting an event, while also feeling like you're not wasting any time, is a really important tool. In regards to the difficulty on both games, neither of them are impossible to complete by any means, but I would say that SSX3 is more difficult than Tricky. Towards the end of the game at Peak 3, some of the events really do push you to your limit, and you have to know and understand the combo system extremely well, especially Style Mile. I cannot count the amount of times I had to restart on that damn course to get a proper score. And remember what I said about not doing monster tricks? Yeah. I fucking wish I knew how to do monster tricks on those courses, but I still refuse to learn. I refuse. And to touch on difficulty just one last bit, another thing I really like about SSX3 is the incorporation of platinum trophies for all of the events. Of course you want to shoot for first place, but if you get down a race super quick or get an insanely high score during a show-off event, you might notice that you get a platinum trophy instead of a gold trophy. These trophies are really worth it. You get a ton more money and it feels great to have all platinums. And for experienced players like myself, and probably the ones watching this video, platinum trophies are a great additional goal to strive for. Yeah, okay, you got gold in all your events, but did you get platinum? Did you get the highest medal you can get? Guess you gotta keep trying. And you don't have to get all platinum medals either. Just getting one could be a huge benefit to a player because you get more money and rewards than you would for a gold medal. And so, with all that said and done, which game's superior? You know it's gotta be 3, baby. Oh baby, I'm sorry. No, but seriously, SSX3 wins, and that's okay. It's a newer game, it builds upon everything that SSX Tricky did well and adds its own features. Sure, there's always going to be parts of SSX Tricky that I miss when I play SSX3, but ultimately, it is a better game and that's how it should be. Now I know I said I was going to make a video covering the music on both games, but ultimately I don't really see much of a purpose. I'm not a musician, I don't know much about music in the first place, and I know that I love the soundtracks in both games. They both have stellar soundtracks, and incorporate the music quite well into the snowboarding to make it feel even more exciting than it already is. But it doesn't really have much of a bearing on the actual gameplay itself. Plus, at this point in time, not everyone even listens to music when they play the game. However, I know that you guys want to hear more than just that, so I will give you my answer. The game with the superior music has got to be Tricky. All the way, baby. That Run DMC track just cannot be beaten. Honestly, I think it's a lot more interesting to think about what a new soundtrack could look like for a remastered SSX game. I think it'd be good to take a Smash Bros approach, everyone is here kind of stance on the music. Find all the best songs from the previous games and add in some new ones to keep it fresh. With that being said, here's my list. What do y'all think? So, you're still here. Thanks for sticking around. I'm happy I completed this series. The SSX games are very near and dear to my heart, and with that being said, I think I'm ready to move on to something else. There's a lot of different things that entertain me, a lot of different things that keep my attention, and I'd love to talk about them. So keep your eyes out.